Algeria, the largest country in Africa, went to the polls on Saturday. It was the second win for President Abdelmadjid Tebboune, who was first elected in a controversial 2019 poll amid a mass popular uprising for new leadership. Tebboune has apparently won 94.7% of the vote. Well, to examine the result and to see why many say that human rights in the country are being eroded, I'm joined by Nabila Ramdani, who's a French-Algerian journalist and broadcaster. Nabila, many thanks for coming back on the show. 94.7 is a pretty big margin. Some would say almost unbelievable. What's your take?
Well, good morning, Georgina. In fact, yes, indeed, a win with almost 95% of the vote is, of course, emphatic. And it is the kind of score that has become a regular feature of Algerian elections since independence. And it certainly reflects the tight control the so-called pouvoir, the power has on it. And as the head of the pouvoir, which is the security state services, including a very powerful military, President Abdelmadjid Tebboune would by convention be expected to walk elections like this. And this is exactly what he's done. Around 5.3 million voters out of 5.6 million voted for President Tebboune. And as usual, a pretty conservative population would have got behind him because they fear instability. So in short, the army candidate always wins and always wins easily. And that's the pattern of Algerian elections. Now, there's also an Algerian electoral commission that monitors all the voting. And it insists that transparency and fair competition was guaranteed. And since coming to office in 2019, Tebboune has ensured lavish social spending based on increased energy revenues, and this clearly had a very positive effect on his vote. And since the start of the Ukraine war, Algeria has become Europe's second biggest gas supplier by pipeline, and revenue raised is certainly reflected in government spending.
I mean, there have been allegations that the elections were not free and fair, and one of the reasons for this was the date change.
Yes, well, as many as 24 million people were eligible to vote in this election that has been moved forward by 3 months. And the change in the election schedule certainly favoured President Tebboune for the simple reason that his opponents have had less time to campaign. His opponents, Youssef Aouchiche of the Socialist Forces Front and Abdallah Hassan Sherif of the Movement of Society for Peace, had certainly voiced concern at the new schedule. Usually the election is was held in December so that voters can avoid the intense summer heat, but President Tebboune argued that there will be an increased turnout as everybody gets back after the summer holiday. And this time around, the turnout was about 50% compared with 40% in 2019. What boosted President Tebboune's campaign is also that he's been touring Algeria, trying to drum up enthusiasm in the political process, and especially voting. And there's also a lot more use of the media and, of course, social media to encourage people to try and get out and contribute to democracy in a relatively young country.
Algeria's never had a peaceful handover of power. Will this be a first?
Well, I think, there have been concerns, of course, about the way power is handed over, not least of all since President Abdelaziz Bouteflika was ousted in a popular uprising after spending 2 decades in office. And there's also concerns, of course, about respect of human rights, which is arguably the best barometer to gauge how democratic a nation is. So, of course, this was a huge issue in this election. But modern Algeria, in many ways, retains the tradition of its former colonizer, France, which is the imperial power that only pulled out of Algeria in 1962 after being defeated by the Algerians in a war of independence. And many of those who had helped to defeat the French, including former President Abdelaziz Bouteflika, feared that the new Algerian state would collapse without an immensely strong security state and the domination of police, the military, and secret service under an immensely powerful president continues to this day. And in this sense, Algeria is certainly not unlike France. Now, of course, the system can lead to human rights abuses and And groups certainly say that violations have continued and that something needs to be done about it. And President Tebboune has insisted that he's making Algeria less reactionary and less secretive as he tries to create a modern, inclusive society. And he would argue that the economic middle class is expanding, and this naturally creates a more stable society, one where repression becomes less frequent.
Nabila, thank you very much indeed. That's Nabila Ramdani, and this is Monocle Radio.